Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Walewa, and welcome to this month's virtual information session. Today's session is titled Finding a Neighborhood, an Apartment, and a Part-Time Job, which are three really important topics. And I know a lot of you who are applying to the Brown School or who are already admitted to the Brown School are really anxious to find out a lot more about that, and so we're super excited about that. I use the pronouns he, him, and his, and so I want to make sure that you know that. My role at the Brown School is Associate Director for Admissions and Recruitment, and I just really love this topic, this idea of actually the transition of you all coming here, which is the most exciting time of the year for us here at the Brown School. Before we get into our guests, I will have a couple of reminders. One of them, of course, is that we have a collection of previously recorded videos that you'll see on our YouTube page. Make sure to check them out. There's a whole host of information that you'll find extremely helpful as you're looking to explore the Brown School and also as well as to join our community. Today's topic will cover several logistical areas that I think that you'll be curious about. Whether you're transitioning from the neighborhood county or whether you're coming from across the globe, I think these are topics that are really important. And with that being said, we want to make sure that you know that you can submit your questions live as we do our live feed. Just go ahead and use the chat feature there, and we'll collect those. We'll make sure that we get access to those. With that being said, I think while I'd love to talk to you all day, I think you all definitely want to hear from some of our current students. And so today we have Ruth and Jonathan, and so I'll have the two of them introduce themselves. If you can give a little bit more details about who you are, and we'll get started.
Hi everyone, my name is Ruth Katumba, and I'm in the MPH program. And this is my second year with a specialty in epidemiology and biostatistics, and I'm from Uganda.
And I'm Jonathan. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm graduating here from the MSW program in a couple weeks, along with Ruth.
Yes.
And I individualize my concentration, and I'm from Elgin, Illinois, just outside of Chicago.
Excellent. I mean, I'm super sad that they're leaving, for sure. They're two of my favorite people, and so we'll definitely get to hear more of their stories. So before we get into it, we want to give you a few bits of information about some ways in which we give you some information about our part-time jobs. So on the slide that you're going to see here in a moment is our part-time job fair. So during orientation, which starts 1 week prior to school starting, international orientation starts about a week and a half prior to school starting, and then the rest of the Brown School orientation will start the Monday before. We do a part-time job fair. This is an opportunity for you as incoming students to check out some options, and it's organized by Career Services. There will be both Brown School and outside organizations at this fair, and it'll be a great chance to get exposure to a lot of different opportunities. The second opportunity for you is using our online option, which is Simplicity. It's our online database. As an enrolled student, you actually have access to this database. You can use it to search for part-time positions, both within the Brown School and opportunities at local service organizations. Positions are posted throughout the year, so even if you don't get an opportunity right away, just know that you'll have continual access by using what we refer to as your WUSTL key. You will receive more information about your WUSTL key, which should allow access to Simplicity starting this May. All right, so let's get into it. I think there's a lot of questions that we'll want to jump right into. So for both Jonathan and Ruth, I'm going to start with the first question here, which is, could you share with me a little bit more about your part-time job search and how you came into the position or positions you've held since you've been here at the Brown School?
Okay, so first off, I was really fortunate in finding out that I was admitted to the Brown School. I tried to stay connected with the admissions office, and through that I was able to stay up to date. So for example, when the school put out research fellowships, I was immediately on top of that and applied for that, and that was one of my very first part-time jobs here at the Brown School. And then also, once I got here, connecting again with the admissions office and Simplicity and that part-time job fair, I was able to ultimately apply for the ambassador position in the admissions office, which has been one of the greatest experiences that I've had at the Brown School and had me connect with these wonderful people. Since then, I've also been a master's research assistant as well with the iChad Center at the Brown School. And again, that came through utilizing connections in the classroom, looking at faculty and what they were doing, and being open to having those conversations with them and just seeking them out and talking to them about the work that they're doing, and them being very open to giving me the opportunity to work with them and to work with what I'm interested in.
Yeah, so as most of you probably know, I've worked in admissions here for my 2 years here at the Brown School. I know that we often post job opportunities that the Brown School admissions team is aware of through the Admitted Students Facebook page. I also did look through Simplicity and applied to a couple of other positions too as well within career services and within the Siteman Cancer Center. Ultimately settling on admissions just due to like personal fit and other reasons that I'm sure we could probably talk about later too. But it was a pretty easy process and there's a lot of opportunities. Typically, I know those opportunities start really opening up like late July, early August when people are starting to come to St. Louis to start their time at the Brown School, so that way they have enough time to really start to interview for those positions as well.
Great, thank you both. And so this next question I have here is, as you think about outside of your actual job experience, can you share, are there any other volunteer opportunities or leadership opportunities that you've taken on, whether it's either you or your peers? Can you speak to that at all?
So I've had the opportunity to not only work within the Brown School, but also at the medical school. And that was also part of my practicum. And I know a couple of my classmates who are pursuing work at the medical school. So it's very often, I'm doing a master's in public health, there's intersection with the work that people are doing at the medical school. So people do get work from there. And then also residential life. I understand some of my classmates have pursued that. And there's no shortage of volunteer opportunities around the Brown School if that's something that you want to get involved with.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely lots of opportunities that are pushed out through like career services or just when you're networking with your peers and seeing if there are places that might need additional volunteers or places that might have some part-time job opportunities too as well. Mm-hmm. Not just like only on campus, but also off campus within the St. Louis community.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, thank you. So, I also want to put a plug out too. We have this program through admissions and recruitment called the Peer Outreach Volunteer Program, or POV program. It's a great opportunity for you to start giving back to the Brown School prior to graduating. And so it's a chance for you to volunteer and talk to your prospective students throughout the admission process. I know a lot of you are feeling the same anxiousness about that transition to a new city, maybe to a new program. And so it's a great way to help people out. And so you can start giving every time, which we believe is probably the most valuable thing that you can give, which is your time. All right, so there's a question here about really balance, which I'm getting chuckles, so we'll see how this goes. How do you balance working part-time and carrying on with studying? And so I'll ask my friends over here about that.
Ooh, that's a really good question though. I think a lot of it has to do with like aligning yourself with your intentions and what you want to do with your time. Specifically, if you're needing more time to focus on academics and that's something that you need, creating that space so that way you can do that, and then trying to find pockets where you can work. I will say that I know my experience personally working on campus, it's been a little easier to try to create some of that balance, being that the people that hire students on campus are aware that we are students first. And I think that that's really important for us to keep in mind too as well, kind of balancing that with our need to just like make money to support ourselves or to have extra money to do fun things or to help pay for tuition, books, other opportunities like conferences, things like that. So it's just about really, I think, aligning yourself with your own intentions and figuring out what you need the most. It's how to find your balance.
I think like Jonathan has highlighted, the people in the Brown School and other on-campus job opportunities are very cognizant of the fact that you are a student and that you are a student first. But it also comes down to you kind of self-reflecting and understanding, like he said, what do you want from your part-time experience and what kind of time do you have? Do I want to focus more on my education, or do I have a little bit more time to like get invested with work, and what kind of work is that? So if you're doing a research assistant position, that's going to be a little bit more involving in terms of brain power. So you're going to have classwork and you're going to also have to be innovative and involved in that research process, whereas you could work in places, say like the library, where I understand my peers get to do some of their classwork while they wait on help people in the library. So in choosing your job opportunities, be cognizant of the time that you have and how much you're willing to invest.
Yeah, and again too, just to bounce off too, finding a job that really works for you too. So if you know that you have a lot of energy to like interact with people, The ambassador position's a cool opportunity for that, but if you're a person who needs a little more quiet time, a library or even a research center might be a little more helpful because you can kind of sit and plug away and things like that.
That's great. Thank you both. All right. So let's talk about some more logistics. The question about grad school that often comes up for us is, what does part-time actually mean? I mean, how many hours a week on average do you or your peers work? And actually, what do you all recommend to our viewers, both watching live as well as those who are watching the playback?
Okay, so I'm an international student. As I already mentioned, I'm from Uganda, and we are only allowed to work 20 hours a week. There's a limit. So even if you wanted to be, even if I wanted to be superwoman and go beyond that, I wouldn't. But in terms of advice and how much of that time do you actually want to max it out, as opposed to probably do 15 hours, I think I would, again, it kind of comes to an individual's like acknowledgement of what they're capable of. A lot of the time I would say coming into it, maybe keep it down to maybe 13, 15 hours, and then see how you feel about that and how that fits into your Brown School schedule before you decide to max that out or maybe cut it down. I feel like that's a better way to go about it.
Yeah, again, it's just like knowing yourself. I would say start small. You could always add more, but you can't like take away hours once you've made that commitment. Unless you like have like really good conversations with your supervisors and things like that. And I know that most people are super understanding. I know for me personally, it would be hard for me to say, no, I have to say no to this now, which I think is a pretty common thing for just a lot of people, is figuring out how to say no to things too, as well, as far as like hours and schedules and things. So I think a lot of it is knowing yourself and knowing how much you can flex your time and things like that.
And also the experience of the Brown School is about growth. So coming into a place where you are capable of saying no. And know that it's hard for a lot of us, but just coming to that knowledge that now I think I'm done. This is my limit. And maybe sometimes you have to have certain experiences to know what that limit is. I know that being in the Brown School has allowed me to be more realistic with myself and how I dedicate my time.
Great. Yeah, these are all very, very important things. Actually, it takes most of us well deep into our career before we figure out how to say no and to kind of cut off a lot of the extra stuff. So very, very good advice. You know, for me, it's usually watching movies like Endgame, and I'm not going to ruin it. Don't worry. I know it's been a week, but no spoilers. All right, we'll move on. Someone's going to watch it 10 years from now and be like, what is he talking about? Let's move on. We have some additional information for you here. So we're going to put up a slide for you about a couple areas. One of them, of course, is federal work study. As a graduate student, some of you still may be eligible for federal work study. It allows for you to work in a variety of areas at the Brown School. Students may be hired for clerical positions, IT positions, facilities, or even library services, as mentioned before. Some also work as research assistants under work study within our many research centers. So to be involved in work study opportunities, you'll want to confirm your award letter from the Brown School when it comes to your financial aid in order to see if you're eligible for that. Ruth really covered this well, but this next slide has to do with international students. Just a reminder, if you're going to be working, it requires an F1 visa. As she stated also, it's important to know that you have a maximum of 20 hours a week that you can work, and unfortunately, you're not eligible for federal work study jobs. But again, if you have an F1 visa, there are employment opportunities for up to 20 hours a week, which is the maximum that we have our domestic students work as well. So you're in good shape there. And then finally, there are a few other announcements and reminders on slide. Admitted Student Resources is actually one of the pages that we actually have here. There's a lot of important information, including where you do your intent to roll. Today is May 1st, so for those of you who are watching live, I know this is a pretty exciting day for some of you to provide some commitment and to actually show that you're going to be here. You can also find out about financial aid resources, additional funding opportunities, and also look out for other updates. Make sure that you're checking this page on a regular basis. It's going to be updated throughout the summer, and I think it's a really important resource. And then finally, for those of you who are still working on your application, and we know that there's some of you out there, we've been in touch with you. Just know that we are at this point, after today, are on a rolling admission calendar. So once you apply, you'll get your answer within 4 to 6 weeks, and we'll send out an announcement at some point throughout the summer once we cut out the application. So we're still accepting applications. We're excited to see if those of you who are interested in joining our community. All right. So let's talk about housing. This tends to be, of course, just an interesting topic for us all the time. I know we had some small side conversations prior to this broadcast, and so I'm just super excited for our current students to share with you all what opportunities we have in there. So we're gonna, again, jump right in there with this question. And so, yeah, actually, I'm gonna take one of these questions from that was presented to us prior to today's session. Let's talk about neighborhoods. When you're considering neighborhoods and potential roommates, what are your biggest considerations?
I think for me, it was all about just the lifestyle that I chose to live and where I wanted to be geographically in proximity to the school. So I did think about wanted to be close by the school for my first year to just really get settled into the area. But then I was able to move further out into the city for my second year to really just kind of match my lifestyle. There was more access to public transportation that I like to use. It was kind of closer to practicum for me as well too. So that was really kind of my intention about choosing neighborhoods and places. I think a lot of it is just what do you want to see when you walk out of your front door in the morning or in the afternoon, or where do you want to come home to? And that can be a little challenging sometimes, but I know that I'm able to stick it out for a year in a place too. So if you're not, it's just for a year.
Yeah, I know that cost. So I moved to the U.S. and my husband was already here, so that was not really an issue for me. But for the classmates that I have talked to about this, I know that cost was a very big contributor to that decision.
Mm-hmm.
So which neighborhood can I afford? And that came from interaction with people here in the admissions office and with housing that they were linked to through the admissions office, and just understanding, okay, I can afford this. And also those conversations that they had with people on the Facebook group, which is created for admitted students, and how they felt that rapport was going. And then getting here, that's when kind of you get a feel for the environment, and their lifestyles came into play. And okay, maybe this neighborhood doesn't work as well for my lifestyle, and then they could make adjustments. Just knowing that it's not written in stone, once you get here, you probably be able to make a more, informed decision about where you want to live.
Yeah, and it just goes back to if you need to stick it out for just a little bit, you can, and then find somewhere that you're more comfortable with too. Housing is by no means in shortage here in St. Louis for students.
And it's meant to be affordable, or relatively affordable for students.
Yeah,
so
I would say this is definitely one of the more affordable places to live for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. We've brought this up in previous sessions, but especially if you're coming from the coast or some of the more expensive places here in the Midwest, I definitely would say that you have plenty of options for affordable housing. So I want to ask maybe these questions kind of packaged together a little bit, but you both have had access to the admitted student Facebook page, and have you seen people kind of use that, and how did that work out? And then also, just to add on top of that, what would be some advice beyond just that neighborhood, just the kind of the nitty gritty, what's helpful in the process of actually securing housing, finding a landlord, signing a lease? What things would you want to know if you were to do it all over again, or if you were not coming to an already set up situation?
So I know I used the Facebook group to find the first person that I lived with, and I still live with them now, even though they graduated last year. And so that was really helpful. I know that too, sometimes as people are building more connections too, especially for folks who are coming from out of town and making connections to people who live nearby. I know that some people have offered saying, hey, yeah, I'd be happy to look at this place for you, or, oh, I know that neighborhood, because I know that currently we have a couple of folks in the current admitted student group who are local here to St. Louis and can provide a little more insight and context to certain areas or things that have worked for them. As far as finding a place, I know I used Zillow and apartments.com and kind of looked at their ratings for walkability and for access to the public transportation. Those were some pretty big things for me too, just because I don't really care to drive very much. So those were my big things.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that or echo that, the administrations page was very comforting for me in particular in getting to interact with those students who were local and their knowledge of the area. And just also just feeling that kind of I guess, camaraderie, like knowing that we're all anxious about it and we're all trying to
We're all in
figure it
together,
out.
for sure.
Yeah, and that some people had the answers and that they were willing to share that on their group, and that helped along the process. And that even when you get here, you know a couple of people that are willing to just walk through the process with you, and at some points are as confused as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that I know we had talked about too is at the university, we don't push any particular property company or landlord company at all, but we know that there's quadrangle housing, and I think there's another one, a parallel, that are connected to the university. And one of the points is even if you haven't secured housing right away and you move here, there are some options if you go to those companies that are connected to the university for some temporary housing until you secure long-term housing. And so there's some really good options for you if you're not feeling totally secure, and you can arrange those long distance. And again, since they're connected with the university, I think that's a great opportunity. There was a question about places for information for landlords that was submitted earlier, and the question is there something that could help me once I have my WashU email login credentials? And again, I would just say definitely go online to Quadrangle Housing. If you go on the main university website, which is www.wustl.edu, we affectionately refer to that as Wustel, so www.wustel.edu, and then just do a search for Quadrangle Housing. There's going to be some really good information there to get you started, and then to use the companies that our folks here have talked about. All right, so let's talk about neighborhoods, because for me in St. Louis, one of the best things is our neighborhoods here. I've been in St. Louis for 16 years. 16 years. I'm a California kid. I'm like 16 years. So I was a California guy and lived in other states prior to coming here. St. Louis is a city of neighborhoods, and I love going to all of them. And so I'm just kind of curious, as you all, not just necessarily where you live, but what are some places that you and your friends or peers like to explore? What are some of your favorite neighborhoods in St. Louis? Kind of what do you like to take advantage of, if you ever take advantage of not being a student and have time to not study?
Yeah, so I see another question here too, just like neighborhoods close to campus. So like some neighborhoods close to campus are the Central West End, University City, the Del Mar Loop area, Dogtown, which is also I think known as Clayton Tam. I don't know why they call it that. Everyone calls it Dogtown here. Skinker de Bolivar, DeMunn, Richmond Heights, Maplewood. Those are kind of, and then Clayton. That's really the general like surrounding north, south, east, west, all directions for neighborhoods there. Go back and rewatch that if I said that really fast because I talk really fast. But I currently live in Tower Grove East. It's part of just like South City in general. It's by Tower Grove Park, and I really love it there. It's a pretty socioeconomically diverse area. It's pretty connected to the immigrant and refugee community here in St. Louis. It's home to the International Institute at St. Louis. It's in that neighborhood. It's got a lot of access to public transportation, lots of like different kinds of ethnic foods and restaurants and things like that too, which I really like. So that's kind of my favorite area to be in, is where I live.
So I've lived in the Skinker de Bolivar neighborhood, and I've also lived in University City. And I would say that I enjoyed both neighborhoods. I enjoyed both neighborhoods for different reasons. Skinker de Bolivar because it had, unlike what you don't like the suburban feel, but I like the suburban feel. Just having families, people walking their dogs, and University City is a little bit more student concentrated, so there are a lot more apartments, and I like being in that environment because, again, I'm around students and they kind of get what I'm going through. But then both of them kind of have access to the Del Mar Loop, which I love the buzz and bustle of the Del Mar Loop and just interacting with all the different people on the loop. But I would say that one of my more favorite neighborhoods is Tower Grove, and getting to Tower Grove Park and the International Festival.
Yeah,
in the
Festival
summer.
of Nations in the summer.
Yeah. I really enjoy those.
I think the cool thing about St. Louis is that there genuinely is like a space for everybody. If you're wanting something more urban, there's places for that. If you're wanting something more residential and quiet, like Ruthie likes, there are tons of those places too. So yeah, feel free to like just kind of explore, see what's around in the area. Lots of places have like little commercial districts too, which is kind of like just like a little stretch of like shops, restaurants, coffee, nightlife, things like that too. So if you want to live closer to that for like more of like a urban like city experience, you can do that. But then if you want something a little more quiet, there's also spaces for that too.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, I always think about I'll be in different neighborhoods in St. Louis, and visiting friends or something, and you walk around the corner and there'll be some random restaurant or bar or a shop, it's just one of the coolest things about St. Louis is that you can always find your spots, and they're like it's St. Louis again. Surprisingly, all the neighborhoods that they mentioned again, I'll encourage you to go back and take a look at that, or reach out to our office, and we'll kind of give you our top favorite neighborhoods as far as things to do that are fun in St. Louis. Cost of living is relatively low. There's a lot of things that are free in a lot of these different, like parks and these events that are like whether it's art openings or whether it's free concerts. Twilight Tuesday's coming up. Botanical Garden concerts are coming up. The movies on Art Hill are coming up, and those things are all free. Those are super cool. And then surprisingly, I shouldn't say that. Maybe some people will take this as disrespect, but I'll say that for me, it took me 10 years. So it shows what kind of life I don't have. But it took me 10 years to realize that St. Louis is a foodie town. We have great restaurants.
So foodie.
So foodie, right? So do you all want to give your top, maybe if you pick some favorite restaurants or anything like that?
Yeah. So if you love Ethiopian food, Mescarim on South Grand is super, super wonderful. And then I know like if you're like wanting like a cute brunch moment in University City, there's Winslow's House. But my favorite place to go is Lulu's Local Eatery. It's also on South Grand. Everything there is plant-based, which makes me happy. They have like a lot of like glutenless, nut-free things too, which is really nice.
Yeah. I would say my favorite food right now is Mexican food, and that comes really close to like Chinese food. So coming from Uganda, these are not foods that I get a lot of exposure to. So moving to St. Louis, I definitely frequent places that I can get that. And right now my favorite Mexican place is Mi Ranchito, and that is close to the Loop as well. And then I think my favorite Chinese place is Lulu Seafood, and that is on Olive Boulevard.
Very good. All right, so I'm going to get us back on track because I love talking about food, and we'll definitely get derailed here. We're going to take a minute now and actually take some, there's some questions that we'll kind of wrap up our time together with from the audience. And so let's see here. All right, there's a question about, from a real specific question about your fields. The jobs that you've taken, are they related to the respective fields that you all plan on going into? And to quote this question, or are you finding work on a survival basis?
Do you want to take this first?
Yeah, I can take this first. I like the survival basis part of the question. So I don't believe that I've taken a job for a survival basis. Every single job that I've taken at the Brown School has had intention behind it. The research fellowship was because of the faculty members' interests aligning with mine and feeling that I could learn something from that. And then coming into the Brown School and having those experiences inform what I thought I wanted to do and just give that meaning. And again, that informed how I approached other faculty members to continue to work with them. And then even working in the student ambassador position, because the admissions office was so instrumental in my process, I felt that it was important for me to come in and be part of that process for someone else. So every single one of them was intentional. It was not necessarily about survival, but yes, thank you that it was part of my survival, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that coming from just like a social work perspective, being in the Office of Admissions, we're talking to people a lot, kind of exploring feelings, reactions, worries, hopes, things like that, which is something that you would do with any time that you're working with people, I think, and creating like very meaningful relationship with people. So it was very much a place to kind of practice some social work skills and to have kind of this working knowledge of just like interacting with people and communication styles and how people are heard and felt like they're understood and listened to. It's a pretty big opportunity to do that.
He's really good at that. He is.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you ever want to get social work, call our office, but before he graduates. All right.
There are some great first-year students that are also super good at that, though.
I agree. There's some great first-year students who can definitely help out a bit. We have a question. I think we really already answered this one. I just want to acknowledge it. It's a student coming from Japan who's entering in the future, and they want to know for students who are international, finding an apartment, part-time job, how do you find support? And so I think that's a lot of what we've covered already. So we're going to move on to the live questions, additional live questions. Can students apply for teaching assistant positions?
So at the Brown School, most, if not all, the teaching positions, I say most because I can't totally confirm it, are for our PhD teaching fellows and candidates. The assistant positions that we have on campus for master's level students typically surround research and kind of more administrative sides of things, but in particular, like teaching positions are typically reserved for our PhD students.
So I think that's true, but once you've done your foundations classes, I know some of the foundations instructors are open to taking on master's students, but it's usually students that they've had in their classes and kind of mentored through the process.
And I actually do remember a former ambassador who graduated last December was a TA for an undergrad history level class too. So that's an opportunity to look into, like if you have a background in history or chemistry or the language arts, to see if there are any opportunities for that as well. Or global health, public health. There's a whole bunch of opportunities. I think it just kind of requires you to put some feelers out and to kind of start making connections with the WashU campus if that's something you're interested in.
That's great. All right, so another question. Oh, okay, so one of the questions is coming up is about the student ambassador position, and that both of these folks definitely worked in our office, and I promise this was not intended to be a commercial for you to apply to our position and work with our wonderful teammates, including Brianna, who's behind the scenes with us today. But if you could talk about kind of the application process or just kind of the student ambassador program, kind of how you got involved in that program.
Want to start?
Sure. The application, it kind of comes out midsummer, kind of around the time when a lot of the other jobs are starting to be posted. I know that for the past couple of years, Brianna, who is our master behind the curtain, usually makes a post in the admitted students Facebook group once that goes live, along with the simplicity information, like the job ID and things like that. There's usually for this job and for most other jobs, a cover letter, a resume or CV. Sometimes there's a little bit of a written response. You're typically called in to interview, meet with some people from the team, and then we reach out to you regarding a decision.
Yeah, and I think the process is really fluid. You don't have to wait for too long. You get the application in, and Brianna reaches out to have that interview. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so again, you'll find out about this throughout the summer, and of course, after you arrive. So I would definitely take advantage of the countless opportunities throughout the Brown School as well as outside of the Brown School. There's some great ways for students to get involved. All right, so let's talk about this next question, which is, what sort of projects do you work on in your part-time jobs?
I feel like Ruthie would be a good one for this because you've had such a myriad of different experiences.
Oh, I think it really depends on the job and the time of year and what's driving the projects in, for example, the research center or the admissions office at a particular time of the year. So I know that while I was in the admissions office, I did do a lot with making phone calls for admitted students and reaching out to them and following up with their questions. While I'm working as a research assistant, I've done grant writing, I've done literature searches. So basically building on that research process, so people getting into those grants for research and then implementing that research.
And then I know within admissions, I've done quantitative and qualitative analysis based on survey feedback for events. This last semester, my big project was Admitted Students Weekend and working with the team closely on that. And then just kind of the general day-to-day administrative things, emails, phone calls, making sure that there are things that are prepared for when people come to visit us, answering questions, holding space for people who are feeling uncertain about their ability to get into the Brown School, which I think is silly because you're all great. So yeah, just kind of those are some of the projects that I worked on, I suppose I could say.
Great. It looks like our one of our last questions that's coming in from the live audience is, how are housing and campus life opportunities for graduate students different compared to undergraduate housing and campus life opportunities? Do you know anyone who's worked in campus life or res life or housing?
Yeah. So for undergrads, housing is typically either on or off campus. For grad students, there is no guaranteed on-campus housing. I know there are a couple of jobs that come with temporary housing. I can't recall what those jobs are though. I think they're college prep jobs for folks. But typically grad students are on their own to find housing, whether it be through independent landlords or property management companies or through Quadrangle or Parallel, things like that. And then as far as like campus life opportunities, I know that, and maybe this is speaking to that question, but there are tons of student groups here at the Brown School specific to our programs. And then there's also graduate student level groups that you can become involved in as well. And that's pretty similar to undergraduate as well. They have student groups too.
Just speaking a little bit about, you mentioned temporary housing, so I know that people are anxious about their housing situations, and I just wanted to highlight that for those people who feel like they don't have that figured out by the time it's time for them to come to the Brown School, there is temporary housing for graduate students as they try to sort that out, and I actually have a friend who took advantage of that and was able to link with Quadrangle even at that time in the semester and fix her living situation.
Yeah.
That's great. I know that must be a relief. I know that ideally you don't find yourself in that position, but if that's the case, it's a good position to have that as a backup. So start doing that work right now. Contact our office. We'll give you our information in a little bit to make sure that if you have any questions to follow up on when it comes to all of these topics, we'll definitely do that. I think that's it. I think that's all the live questions we had. So I just want to, before we wrap up, I just want to thank you both, Ruth and Jonathan. I mean, is there anything else? Is there like a final thing that you need to say? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything, I definitely want to give you the floor before we wrap up.
I guess I just want to put out a reminder that you are awesome by virtue of the fact that you're considering the Brown School, that the Brown School has given you an admission, and you just need to take a step back, get some perspective, and understand that this is a new experience, but it doesn't have to overwhelm you. Take it a day at a time.
Yeah, a day at a time I think is really important. Remembering to breathe, ask for help if you need it. That's something that I know that I've learned just throughout my time at the Brown Schools, just ask for help when you need it. There are always people, whether it's people who are also additional like admitted students, or if it's us in admissions, or if it's somebody else that you've connected with, just reach out for help, support, ideas, any guidance too. I know that we in admissions are super happy to help, and I imagine that most other folks are really kind-hearted and good to help too.
And all the other offices in the Brown School, career services, financial aid, they're really all there to support you. So if you need that support, do not hesitate to reach out, because that's what they're there for.
I appreciate those kind words. So let's keep this conversation going. I know we have our admitted student Facebook page, and so I think you can talk with each other now online and post questions there, talk with our current students who are also curating that page as well, so you can get some really good information, as well as staff members. So thank you for your time. As we wrap up, we're going to switch to our final screen here for a few reminders for you. Our next virtual information session is June 5th, and it's titled Ask Us Anything. So you get to submit these questions ahead of time and live, and we're going to have some folks here who are going to be able to cover a whole assortment of topics. Don't forget to submit your questions on our website prior to the session. For admitted students, make sure you check out the admitted students page regularly for updated information and some job postings. That's just a great opportunity for you to take advantage and stay in touch with us throughout the summer. And as always, feel free to reach out to me or any member of our admissions team. We're the most accessible and responsive admissions team that you no doubt have encountered as you've searched for your graduate programs, and there's a reason for that. We really believe in what we have to offer in our community, and we're super excited to share it with anybody who's interested, and we're also really happy for folks who feel like it's as much of a connection and a good fit for them as it is for us, and so we'd love to hear from you. So my email address is on there. You can also email us at brownadmissions@worcester.edu. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month.